So in this segment, we can do some more Telegraph propaganda pieces, really. I read through this piece. Honestly, it's so dumb what this guy's talking about. It's genuinely very frustrating trying to cover this stuff. But this is that kind of that A-grade propaganda, that good stuff, good to keep you sharp. So Boris Johnson has beaten the ultra Remainers at their own game by comparing the war in Ukraine to Brexit. This from Tim Stanley. What can you say about this one, ladies and gentlemen? Honestly, so when he says this is sarcasm, and the thing that people like Tim don't realise is sarcasm really doesn't come through well in text. But when you make it this obvious, it's just poor writing, isn't it? So he goes, when the PM compared Ukraine's war to Brexit, both motivated by freedom, he said, I almost threw up. The idea of a politician using the struggle of those brave people to make a cheap point about Europe was so disgusting. Not only will I never vote Tory again, I might not vote at all and spend my days on some Hibernian island shouting, damn you, Boris. Very metropolitan elite of you, being able to spend time on an island. But let's go back and actually listen to what Johnson said.
And I know that it's the instinct of the people of this country, like the people of Ukraine, to choose freedom every time. I can give you a couple of famous recent examples. When the British people voted for Brexit in such large numbers, I don't believe it was because they were remotely hostile to foreigners.
Kind of were, bro. We definitely were.
It's because they wanted to be free. And I know...
Free to attack foreigners.
That it's the
interview.
And I know it's because they wanted to be free.
So, the comparison itself, I don't know why I have to stress this to people, but we entered the EU or wherever it was at the time willingly. We entered it willingly and we left willingly. There was no bloodshed apart from, the late Joe Cox, who was murdered by a racist. But when you look at the situation in Ukraine, their freedom has been taken away. Their ability to determine their own future. If they want to join NATO, they can't. NATO have closed the door on it, but that's predominantly because of Russia. Ukraine have also had to close the door on it predominantly because of Russia, a foreign actor. A lot of this stuff kicked off when Ukraine's kind of moved to wanting to join NATO back in 2014, but also they're wanting to join the EU as well. Russia did not like that. They want Ukraine to stay part of their sphere of influence. So, the point that this guy's making is very stupid. And, it's just... The amount of snark and just nonsense in this article is unreal. If you can get paid big bucks by the Telegraph for writing basic articles and just going on Twitter, then sign me up. He goes, I'm not alone. A straw poll of important people on Ukraine on Twitter indicates the entire country, nay, the Western Alliance, is appalled by the words that Boris Johnson said. The Western Alliance is appalled by words. Well, yes, because words typically can lead to actions, which are bad, but okay. Guy Hofstadt called it insane. Donald Tusk said this offends offend the Ukrainians, and this offends the Ukrainians and British common sense. My G can't even cut and paste properly. The SNP's Ian Blackford labelled the speech as morally repugnant. Ed Davey, who runs the Lib Dems, compared Boris to Basil Fawlty, which is like a British comedy, it was part of a comedy thing called Fawlty Towers, I think. It was good, my uncle liked it. Michael Heseltine said millions of Conservatives will be ashamed, which I'm not too sure about. I don't think they feel shame. Alistair Campbell, who really shouldn't really speak on too many of these issues, wrote that our Prime Minister debases himself and his allies. And James O'Brien, the cuddly Liberal bear, who when you squeeze his stomach he says, I hate the Tories, which, okay, was shocked at the levels of Boris's depravity. And Lionel Barber, former editor of the FT and probably the most intelligent man Mr. Barber has ever met, saying like he's some sort of egotist, summed up the remarks as cheap, historically absurd and pandering, which is true. He did so at a Conservative conference saying the Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom just like Britain did when we voted for Brexit, which is simply not true. We didn't fight for anything. There was a campaign, there was a vote, one side won, one side lost, that was it. There's some other political things that happened, but for the most part, that was it. In terms of the situation in Ukraine, there are people genuinely dying for their freedom, for their nation to determine their own future. You cannot compare the two in that sense, in the fight for freedom. You cannot put that those words in a sentence and then compare Ukraine with Brexit. But then, of course, he goes into his moral stupidity, which is that, of course, there is a big difference between using Ukraine to support Brexit and using it to bash or Brexit or promote the EU. So he's saying, like, well, if it's the case that Boris Johnson can't compare Brexit and Ukraine, why should anyone else? Clearly, choosing to not understand Boris Johnson's comparison and why it's so bad. Genuinely, very stupid point. He goes, enormous. I'm thinking of when Lionel tweeted one incontestable fact: Putin's war has reinvigorated the EU, which is true. It's reinvigorated the bonds between nation states within the EU to work together to stop a common enemy, which is Russia. No one wants Russia to invade anywhere in Europe, and we don't know where he wants to go after if he takes over Ukraine. So he's saying, these people are so mad at the Ukrainian Brexit comparison, yet they are also doing this. I'm very intelligent, when he failed to understand what their actual point was. That's why he's clipped specific bits of tweets, taking them out of context. He goes, enormous. I'm thinking of when Lionel tweeted incontestable. James O'Brien replied, imagine having to explain to your children why you chose Farage, DeRees, Johnson and Rees-Mogg over being an integral part of this being, the EU's response to Putin. In the Ukraine later, he said the desire to join the EU is clear. I don't know if he's talking about the UK's desire or the Ukraine's desire. Is totally different when Alistair Campbell said Putin interfered in the Brexit referendum because he knew the EU without the UK would weaken both, which is true. It has weakened both, but it's weakened the UK more so because even when we've tried to drop sanctions on Russian oligarchs, we've been much slower than the EU in doing so, not just because of the scale of the oligarchs in the UK, but the fact that the UK has more access to lawyers and other people, so we can actually drop sanctions quicker. We can figure out what we can do legally in certain cases and action them. Or when Lord Hasseltine, running with the theme, said, I am ashamed that the country that in my lifetime saved European democracy has now absented itself now. So I think I made a bit of a mistake in the article. Hasseltine was actually alive during World War II, or he was alive before World War II. So 1939 to 45, right, really, the dates of World War II. So kind of crazy how old this geezer is, and he's still involved in politics and hasn't retired yet. So I made a bit of a mistake during the video. He was specifically talking about World War II in this paragraph. Where is it gone? It's gone. He said, I'm ashamed that the country that in my lifetime saved European democracy is now absent in itself. He was specifically talking about World War II when, he's kind of ignored all of the other people who, all the other people in the Allied forces that really helped to end World War II and get rid of the Nazis and other things, the fascists. But anyways, on to the rest of the video. I have a lot of issues with this statement, not for the same issue that this Tim Stanley guy has, which is it wasn't just the UK that, quote, saved European democracy. I'm guessing he's talking about World War II here. It wasn't just the UK, it was the Americans, the USSR, which encompassed lots of different people, not just Russians, loads of different people within the USSR, which also obviously took over parts of Eastern Europe and took away any chance of democracy they had. But also it was people in the former colonies, the Canadians, people in the Caribbean, people in the Indian subcontinent that also helped save European democracy. So to make the point that that the country that in my lifetime saved Europe, actually maybe he's not talking about World War II. What would he be talking about then? Doesn't make sense. Is Hasseltine that old to have lived in World War II? I digress. Sorry. Anyways, it's just a very stupid point from Hasseltine. And that others must now determine Europe's response to the invasion, which is true. That it's predominantly the EU that are dealing with the response that are doing the most damage. The SWIFT thing being a predominant thing in that. Layla Moran, the Lib Dem should be spokesperson really, because she's a lady, not spokesman, for Foreign Affairs, observed impartiality, said the Ukraine crisis has made it really, really clear that we are Europeans and our future lies at the heart, lies as a country at the heart of the Europe. So saying we kind of belong with the EU, I think. And it was also a different kettle of fish altogether when the SNP's president, Mike Russell, drew parallels between Moscow's claim over Ukraine and the result of an 8-year-old referendum. When, what this guy, Tim Stanley, is saying, well, if you're saying Boris Johnson can't compare Ukraine and Brexit, that means you can't also do that. I know I made that point a minute ago, but point being is that that's simply not the case. But it's the way Boris Johnson has compared Brexit and Ukraine that's problematic. And even then, it's you shouldn't really be comparing the two anyways. You can say, like, because one is an actual war. You can argue about Putin's war of misinformation against the UK in the referendum, but the simple fact is, if you're falling for bot farms, you're not very bright, really. So it's not a good comparison in the first place. You can argue that, yes, it's reinvigorated Europe and created more of a bond between European countries, but the comparison Boris Johnson made is very stupid. Donald Tusk was on the side of the angels when he told voters in Hungary election, not his country, but the man gets around, that their prime minister was notoriously pro-Putin, which I haven't looked specifically at Viktor Orban, but he's very dodgy. And Ukraine is a war for our future, for Poland, Hungary, and the whole of Europe, which I don't think, well, you could say it's a really stupid statement now that, Putin has ambitions outside of Ukraine, which he probably does. Moldova's on the hit list, apparently. But given that Hungary is a part of NATO, I don't think that Russia would invade Hungary. But you kind of see his point, which is that this war is the war for Europe, and that either on the EU side or on Putin's side, which is a bold strategy nonetheless to go for that sort of angle. And finally, Mr. Hofstadt, in the same breath as condemning the Ukraine-Brexit comparison, which he didn't actually really condemn, he condemned more the point about the freedom argument. Said Brexit was about undoing freedoms and leaving the EU, whereas Ukraine want more freedom and to join the EU, which is true, that Ukraine want to join the EU. But more importantly, the Ukrainians want the freedom to do what they want, to decide their own future. Be that joining the EU or not, the Ukrainians want to determine their own future, and that's something Russia is trying to take away from them. Brexit was about undoing freedoms and leaving the EU, which is true. We've lost our freedom of movement, freedom of goods, freedom of services, freedom of capital. We've lost all that. We've also lost our seat at the table for, deciding EU matters. We've given that up. A lot of freedom there, a lot of ability to have power, or at least a say within certain circles. We've lost all of that. If Ukraine want to join the EU, that should be up to them, and obviously the EU. But it's not up to Russia, and that's a point he's making there. That Brexit was about undoing freedoms, which Putin did back, but it was backed by a lot of bad actors, really. Ukraine want more freedom, which is true. That's what this war is about. Ukraine to determine its own future, not someone else. And then he goes on to end, none of these right-minded people would ever play politics with human suffering. I'm pleased to say none of them ever has, which... blatant sarcasm again, but his point is dumb because Boris Johnson was arguing that the Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom just like Britain did in the Brexit vote, which doesn't make any sense because it's simply untrue. The comparison doesn't make sense because one has to fight for its freedom, the other one didn't. We joined willingly, we left willingly. That was all up to us, no one else. But the Ukrainian invasion is down to Russia. No one else is invading Ukraine. Ukraine can't stop the war willingly. They are fighting for their freedom. Therefore, the comparison doesn't make sense. So this guy saying, well, if you're saying, well, if you're saying that Boris can't compare Ukraine with Brexit, what can you? It's like nuance doesn't exist to these people because they haven't grown out of the university debate phase of I'm so bright and intelligent because I can strawman people. And you can notice that predominantly by the fact that he just clipped out bits of tweets that probably did have more context. I'm blocked by James O'Brien, so I can't actually see what he's put, but I wouldn't be surprised if these people have written far more than this. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. This guy's a joke. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Sorry I got lost in the weeds a bit there. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. This guy Tim Stanley's a joke, and hopefully I'll see you in the next time.